My name is Matthew Cocking. I'm the Forester for the Natural Resources Conservation Service on the North Coast of California. This is part 3 of a 3-part presentation. If you haven't watched part 1 and part 2 already, please go check those out. Those were on conservation planning and prescribed fire in California, and then the NRCS California prescribed fire policy. This is part 3, and I'm going to be talking about some examples of prescribed burns that I've been involved with the planning, and some that have been contracted by NRCS here in Northern California and Humboldt County in the last few years. I'm also going to touch on the economics of these 3 examples, and hopefully that'll give you a picture of what the costs are like and what types of things need to be evaluated in thinking about costs or projecting costs. Example 1 is a rangeland example. This was in central western Humboldt County, fairly close to the coast. It's mostly a shrub and grass fuel type. The goal of this prescribed burn was to kill bacillus brush. A lot of people know that as coyote brush. The picture below on the slide shows the burn unit. And so you can see the amount of brush in there. The goal was to kill a lot of that, or as much of that as possible. It was planned as a 330 or so acre burn, but ended up completing 364 acres over 2 different days, one in late September and the other in mid-October in 2018. For this burn, there was a burn plan written that NRCS did not fund. So there was a prior written burn plan that met our qualifications for a burn plan. We were able to use that to contract our prescribed burning practice. The plan author and the person who acted as burn boss for the burn were different people in this example. Some other notes about this: an interior burning continued late into October that the landowner had to deal with. The trees that you see in the picture, it wasn't necessarily a direct goal to kill a lot of those, but some did die, and it certainly didn't hurt to try and knock some of that back. As you can see in the picture, there's invasion of brush and trees in these rangelands we have in central western Humboldt County. And a lot of our coastal grasslands really have a lot of invasion of coyote brush and also Douglas fir. This is a grazed site, cattle. This is just another shot of the burn unit. This is from the southwest end of the burn unit, up on the ridge, looking towards that knob that you see on top of the hill. There is actually just outside of the burn unit. The line it was held at is right in front of that. And there is a main county road that runs along this ridge and then continues up the ridge here. A couple little drainages that come down and become class 2 at the bottom. Up in here, they're mostly class 3 level type streams. And then as you can see, lots of brush, intermix of grass fuels and brush. And almost all of this brush that you see is coyote brush. There is some spots where there's poison oak thickets, also flowering red currant, some other coastal shrub species, but mostly it's coyote brush. Some of the planning and cost bullet points: we relied on a technical service provider burn plan. So the burn plan was written by a technical service provider. That burn boss or that planner used a lot of visual assessment to assess fuels and assess resource concerns. A couple pictures shows you the resource concern with the brush. Fire break, practice 394 for the fire lines, the holding lines around the fire, was also contracted with this through NRCS and paid for. Critical area planting was a post-burn facilitative practice that NRCS also provided some funding for, to apply some broadcast seeding of some range species after burning to help with some erosion concerns, and then also was a goal for the landowner to improve the composition and get some species that they wanted, some grass species they wanted in there. On the cost side, so the right-hand column here, hired resources for this burn amounted to costs around $9,800. So for 360 acres of burning, the total cost of $9,800 seems pretty good. That's $26 an acre. The burn boss in this example cost $1,000, an NWCG qualified burn boss. There were 2 individuals that burn boss brought with him who were NWCG, National Wildfire Coordinating Group, qualified firing team leaders. Those individuals cost approximately $1,000. The Humboldt County Prescribed Burn Association has bylaws that allow for a 25% payment of to the PBA of the NRCS grant or the NRCS funding that was paid. So that amounted in this example to $3,498. The local volunteer fire departments that came, or other local municipal departments that came to the burn, they were donated funding. So there were 3 of them at $500 a piece, about $1,500 paid. The Air Quality Management District permit fees amounted to about $1,300. This is variable depending on what county you're in. You might pay less or more. I know Humboldt County has some of the highest air quality fees in the state of California. And the burn plan costs about $1,500. PBA resources that came to this burn, so these would be volunteer resources, Prescribed Burn Association resources, 20 plus landowner members, 3 local volunteer or municipal fire department engines. Those received donations from the landowner. And then equipment, torches, hand tools, slip and water tanks, and radios came from the Prescribed Burn Association. CAL FIRE was non-operational with 2 engines coming, offering support, but non-operational, so they were contingency. And then we had a flyover from our local CAL FIRE unit, which was extremely helpful, and got some pictures from that of the burn during implementation, which is pretty cool. So here are some pictures of the burn. This is the morning of the first half of burning, or the first piece in September. This is the upper part of the burn unit. This is during the test fire, so at the ridge line there. This is about an hour, maybe an hour in, 45 minutes into burning. So working down with strip burning downslope off of the main county road there. Continued burning. This is coming around to where I was taking pictures. Another picture, working down an existing access road. The same road. In the distance here, I don't know if you can see my pointer. This is the ocean at the slot of this canyon, or the low point between these 2 ridges. So we weren't that far, about, I don't know, maybe a few miles from the ocean as crow flies. Some other pictures, credits to Landon Quinn Davidson for providing some of these. This is a picture of some of the crowning activity we had in some of the few locations in the burn unit that had Douglas fir. This is from CAL FIRE's plane. So this is looking down on the burn unit. You can see the existing road as a fire line, the holding line that we used. And then coming down on the left side of this picture is constructed fire line that NRCS helped pay for. And you can see there's a black spot here. This was a spot fire that we successfully contained that occurred during the burn. This is after the September day of burning. You can see the upper part of the unit is burned here, and you can see some of the mortality, the brown coloring in the brush. And the lower part of the unit was burned later in October, and that's this lower part down below. Another picture of the upper part. Other pictures of the burning in October. So this was the October burn day, October 17, 2018. This was 2 different flanks. So this would have been the southeast side of the burn unit, and then this would have been the northwest side. So this would have had southern exposure here with a little bit better flame length. Where the trees are in here did not burn much or particularly well on that October burn day. Some before and after pictures. So this was the morning before the fire on September 26, 2018 on the top. And then immediately after burning, it's kind of smoky, but you can see some of the effects there in the picture. And this was the following spring, or the following May. And all the gray shrub that you can see is top killed or killed. And so we really met some good objectives in the top part of this burn unit, which was to kill as many shrubs as possible. What was the NRCS support for this burn? We helped develop a conservation plan that led to the contract, prescribed fire. So that was free planning that I was engaged in with our rangeland specialist in the Humboldt County NRCS field office. We provided financial assistance for 1,770 feet of fire line. Payment for that ended up being a total of $2,389. For the prescribed burning itself, we contracted 330 acres of it. 293 or so was at a rate of $46 per acre, and 37 acres of it or so was at a rate of $6.97 per acre. That 37 acres was areas that didn't really have any brush, so it was just grass fuel that was burned. And then the large part of what was contracted, the 293 acres, were the areas that had a lot of brush. And that was paid at a higher rate. So those were 2 different payment rates for our prescribed fire practice. So there were 2 payment rates used depending on the fuel type in this unit. So for a total cost of $13,993 that NRCS paid for just the prescribed burning, not including the fire line. The actual cost was $9,808, and then the difference between those is the landowner actually coming out on top. However, there were a lot of other preparatory things that had to be done that NRCS couldn't necessarily pay for. So in the end, in some ways, this works out okay for the landowner. I'd like it, as a planner, to be more exact to what the landowner has to do, but there are just, as I said in part one of my presentation, there are scenarios that NRCS cannot account for or does not have payment rate for. So there were some other things that the landowner did that had cost to it, such as providing food for all the volunteers and firefighters, prepping other types of equipment for use during the burn, additional line construction that we couldn't conceive was going to be needed until it got closer to burning or on the day of the burn itself. Those types of things, once you're in an NRCS contract, it can be arduous to try to change. That's how the economics of this burn worked out. So which, a larger scale burn, larger acreage worked out, I think, fairly well for the landowner and for everyone involved. Some of the lessons learned, my lessons from this burn, one thing that I thought was really cool was that highly trained, as well as some untrained PBA members, Prescribed Burn Association members, were able to work together very well on a large burn unit on a couple different days. And then that Prescribed Burn Associations in general in California can take on a large burn unit with success. We know, partners that I work with UC Cooperative Extension and others with the Humboldt County Prescribed Burn Association that have friends over in Nebraska and other parts of the country. We know other areas, other PBAs in other parts of the country can do large burns. And this was good evidence that can be successful in California too. Test and know your equipment beforehand. Estimated numbers, such as in a burn plan, the amount of fire line that's going to be needed, are estimates. You may end up having more or less acres burned or line of fire line constructed than you think ahead of time. So that was an important lesson for me. And then one little piece of information, that spot fire that we had, when our relative humidity dropped below 20, and that only happened for a very small piece of time during the burn, and it was well into implementation. It was later, early afternoon, I think. That was when we had our spot fire. And so keeping track of weather was really important, and it was interesting to see when our spot fire occurred with that.